Hello and Happy New Year. I'm Karen Tuxen-Bettman. I'm a program manager here at Google, and I'm really excited to welcome all of you to this exciting digital event where we're going to learn all about Earth Blox, a new tool powered by Google Earth Engine, which enables anyone to easily analyze and extract insights from petabytes of global data. I'm joined today by three speakers. Genevieve Patnaud is CEO and founder of Earth Blox. Ian Woodhouse is a professor at the University of Edinburgh, and Nick Beecroft is the head of sales at Earth Blox. A warm welcome to you all. After our speakers introduce Earth Blox today and demonstrate how it works, we're going to come all back together here to answer your live questions. So be sure to keep them coming throughout the presentation. You can ask them right below my video here. You can ask your questions, any questions you have or comments you have, and we'll save them to answer them live at the end. Okay, well, now let's get started. Genevieve and team, thank you for being here and take it away.
Thank you very much, Karen and Rayleigh and the entire Google Earth Engine team for inviting us to present today. We're absolutely delighted to be here. So my name is Genevieve Patnaud and I'm the CEO of Earth Blox. I'm also Associate Professor at the University of Edinburgh. And in brief, I've dedicated my entire career to working on climate change, and in particular to using remote sensing to track and quantify the changes that we see on the planet. So Earth Blox, in a sense, is born from a desire to address the climate and sustainability crisis. So that's why we had a very strong presence at COP26. It's also because it's very near where our headquarters are. But the reason I'm putting this slide is also because I want to emphasize how different this COP was from the other COP that I attended before. It was very different because this time there was a real emphasis on innovations. For instance, the last day of the conference, we were invited by the UK Crown Office to present in a specific session entirely dedicated to tech for the planet. What that signals really is that we've moved way past the science, the negotiations on the legal instruments, the debates. We're now starting to move into the solutions. And for me, that really nourishes my hope. A hope that, yes, we can do this. We can all do this together. Innovations alone, however, are not enough. We need everyone to feel that they can do it too. And for that to happen, we need to provide the tools so that people can do this and the tools that are widely accessible. Google Earth Engine, in a sense, is the scaffolding that supports this. And as Earth Blox, our contribution is extending and expanding the reach and impact of Google Earth Engine, so that not only coders and Earth observation experts can get access to sustainability intelligence from planetary data, but rather all of those that work, live, and breathe sustainability. So we do this by building an intuitive, no-code planetary data solutions builder. And that gives change makers, that means you and others, the tools that you need to actually drive the positive change. Simply put, Earth Blox is a programming interface. It allows users to process and analyze Google Earth Engine data without having to code. We basically use a series of modular blocks to help our users create their own solutions. Our clients and users have described Earth Blox as being the Lego for planetary data, and we actually quite like this tagline. So now Earth Blox is available for commercial organizations, but also, and specifically since the audience today is mainly based in education, organization, and NGOs, we're going to be presenting the product as how it can serve teaching, research, but also capacity building. So I'd like to invite Ian now to present how he uses Earth Blox on a regular basis in his work environment. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Genevieve, for the introduction. So my name is Ian Woodhouse. I'm a professor of applied Earth observation at the University of Edinburgh, and I'm also one of the co-founders of Earth Blox. And I'm very excited about Earth Blox. I use it regularly in my research. I use it in teaching, and so I'm here today to talk a little bit about that. So what I'm going to do is give a first example that's much more about the research end, using a platform called Strata that has been built with Earth Blox. And then I'm going to give some examples of teaching. And in between, I'm going to give you a demo of both of those things in action. Now, first, just to identify what are the key features of Earth Blox. Why should you be interested in it? Why am I interested in it? I mean, the primary thing is actually it's really easy to use. The key thing is, though, that it's also, there's no installation, so you don't have to install any software on your computer. It's all cloud-based, works on a web browser, so you can do it on tablets, or it doesn't matter if you're on a Mac or a Windows machine or whatever. And that makes it really easy to use, both in a educational context, but also in a research context if you're on the move or in the field. And what Earth Blox does is it offers you code-free access to that vast data lake that is Google's Earth Engine. So all of that 40 or so terabytes of global data you can get through Earth Blox. And we do it in a way which is much easier than trying to write any code, because we use a visual programming environment. So it's a drag and drop environment where you've got individual blocks that do functions and you add them together to make workflows. We've got a specific education focused version, and that's been developed in collaboration with educators for specifically, and it was, I'll explain the project later, but one of the key features that you can get as an additional component for Earth Blox is that you can use what's called the LTI. So LTI is the Learning Tools Interoperability, and essentially what it provides you is a single sign-on for students. So if you're using something like Moodle or FutureLearn or Blackboard for your virtual learning environment, the LTI integration allows the students, if they're enrolled in a course, to just click a single link and it takes them straight through to Earth Blox and authenticates them. So you don't have to, nobody has to register, and you don't have to register all the users. Another key thing is that it meets all the accessibility and personal security criteria, which is very important. So it meets all the relevant WCAG standards for accessibility at the A level. Now, the first case I'm going to talk about is in collaboration with the UN Environment Programme. And this project, or the development of this platform, came about largely because David Jensen at UNEP was extremely excited when he saw Earth Blox. He described it as the 4++ of what's available in the market. And the key challenge that they had in UNEP was that their country teams across the 130 UN country teams is that they wanted to be able to access up-to-date, relevant environmental and climate data so that it could help support effective decision making, and they really saw that as a way to speed up the from what could be months to almost real time, reduce a lot of the costs, and give them the kind of environmental intelligence that's useful in country decision making. And this is what ended up as Strata, and essentially the brief was to turn the data that you can access from Earth Engine and turn it into good decisions, more effective decision making. And so what the tool does is it identifies what we call hotspots. Hotspots, that term can have lots of different meanings, but what it means in this context is that we're looking at environmental or climate variables that have reached or crossed a threshold, and if they're all happening in the same area at the same time, then that flags it up as what we call an area of concern. So it's not a modeling tool, it's not a probabilistic determinant of what's going to happen. it's just drawing attention to the fact that, well, there's lots of things happening at the same time in the same place here. That's an area of concern that the in-country teams might want to then investigate further. And one of the key things there is not just the environment and climate data, but we've also managed to bring in security data and as well as the vulnerability information about the people that actually live there. And it's fundamentally based on good science-based insights. It's a big team that is involved with Strata. So the University of Edinburgh and UNEP, so the UN Environment Programme, with Earth Blox building and using Earth Blox to build this tool that we call Strata. And the key thing is that it is generating alerts for environmental and climate security hotspots. So it's bringing together this environmental climate conflict stresses, as well as the socio-economic vulnerability factors to identify where things are potentially troublesome. The key thing about Earth Blox is that because it's easy to use and it's flexible and it's really easy to customize, as I'm going to show you in the demo. And what that means is that in-country teams can modify it for their individual country. There are some other platforms around that provide similar kinds of data, but they tend to be quite static. They tend to have a very strict algorithm that's already implemented, and it's quite difficult to modify and customize that for the country, or if you want to modify it for the differences between the dry season and the wet season, for example, then it's this is the real value that Earth Blox provides as the interface. One of the other things to note there is that that Strata is actually one of the group on Earth observations and Google Earth Engine projects. So they supported 32 projects to look at using Earth Engine, and Strata is one of those. And what we do in Strata, it's a fantastic example of how Earth Blox can tap into many of these different kinds of data sets. So not just Earth observation data, but also socio-economic and vulnerability data. So what we've got here is that these are our what we call our 3 baskets of indicators. We've got a first basket, and where we started was looking at the climate and environmental hazards. So things like drought, and that's meteorological drought, which is related to rainfall, or agricultural drought, which is related to soil moisture and vegetation. There's also flooding and flooding into both coastal inundation risk, but also the river flooding risk. We're also incorporating heat wave and land changes such as deforestation and soil degradation. The peace and security data comes from the ACLED database, and in fact, we've had to manage that and import it into Earth Engine ourselves. And then finally, there's the socioeconomic exposure and vulnerability data. So that includes the population demographics, things like access to healthcare, the education, the food security. So all of these factors are included, and the way that we combine these together, and of course, all of this data is available through Earth Engine and Earth Blox. We've done a lot of research to identify which ones are the most appropriate that Earth Blox pulls across and uses in Strata. And the methodology of how we combine these together is we've used what's called the convergence of evidence approach. This has been used in a number of other studies. The JRC have used it often. And we like this, and we took this approach because it was relatively simple. And what it does is that, so up on the left here, we've got the 2 baskets of the climate and environmental indicators and the conflict indicators. And then in the middle, we've got the vulnerability score. And what we do for each of those is that we essentially look at each indicator at the pixel level, and we determine whether or not it has crossed some threshold. And if it crosses that threshold into some kind of danger zone, we red flag it, and then we sum up all the red flags. So it's not a very complex model. It's merely drawing attention to the fact that some areas may have lots of red flags and other areas don't have so many red flags. That's the risk factor, but we also include the vulnerability and exposure factor because we need to take into account, well, does anybody live there? So what are the public population dynamics, and do the people that live there, are they more vulnerable or less vulnerable for the kinds of risks that might be apparent in these indicators? And that gets scored between 0 and 1, so that applies a weighting across the flags from the environment and conflict indicators. And that's what leads to the hotspot map. And this, one of the exciting things about what Earth Blox has built here is in Strata, is that it opens up a lot of opportunities for research that relates things like climate and conflict, for example, because there are many cases where you might think it's straightforward, but actually it's not as straightforward as it first seems. So we're looking at Edinburgh in particular, we're looking at using Strata in a research context for exploring those relationships. Now, how we set the thresholds, that's the thing that is often asked about. And there's two broad ways in which we set these thresholds. One is over time, and the other is in space. So the trend in space is asking the question, is this pixel particularly worse than all the other pixels in the area? Is it particularly drier, or has it got more population, people living there than the other areas? The trends in time is where Earth Engine at the back end of Strata and Earth Blox's capacity to draw in that data. That's where it really excels, because that's where it's not like a GIS. You know, a GIS could take these different layers and model what the risks might be. But what Earth Blox is doing is actually looking at the historical data. So it actually goes into Earth Engine and it says, well, for this pixel, for the particular time of year that you're looking at, what are the typical conditions? And is this statistically worse than you might expect for this kind of time of year? So it doesn't set a specific quantitative value. And the example I'll give just quickly to explain how this works is that if you're looking at the NDVI, for example, in Somalia, where we're going to, Strata is currently focused, they have a dry season and a wet season. So in the dry season, you would expect the NDVI to be much lower than in the wet season. And so it's just setting an NDVI limit doesn't really help. So what the threshold does for the agricultural drought indicator is it says for this particular pixel at this particular time of year or the period of time that you're looking at, what has the historical pattern of that NDVI looked like? And if we are below the 25th percentile of the historical statistics, then we'll flag it as a red flag. One of the important things, and again, the way that the ease by which the user can customize the Earth Blox interface is that the thresholds can be modified so that there is some flexibility to allow users to change that. They may be interested in looking at particular extremes or changing the sensitivity. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you a little demo of it in action. And in particular, I'm going to look at the 2011 famine in the Horn of Africa. Now, the Horn of Africa is a security challenged area, and Somalia in particular, where we're going to focus on in the example, is particularly prone to droughts. But in 2011, it was a particularly devastating drought that led to famine and led to significant displacement of people. So there was a number of refugees that ended up in Ethiopia and Kenya. And what I'm going to do, because I'm demonstrating that anyway, is I'm going to lead straight on to demonstrating the education version of Earth Blox, which is focused partly on the research side, but also on the educational side. So I'm going to give some examples. I'm going to look at the Mozambique flooding in 2019. I'm going to look at the California fires in 2020, and I'm going to look at the El Nino event of 2018-19, looking at some sea surface temperature. So I'm going to go straight into that. Okay, so here we are at this is the interface for the Earth Blox education. I'm just going to quickly show you this before going to Strata, because I just want you to see the general idea of how Earth Blox works. A map interface on the right gives us the capacity to display the outputs, but also input data and choose areas on the map so that we can define areas of interest. And the general model by which Earth Blox and the Earth Blox interfaces work is that we have a toolbox that's got a set of drag and drop blocks. So all of these different data sets we can drag and drop these into the workspace, and then we can generate some processes and do some analysis in our work environment. I'm going to come back to that in a second. So let me show you the Strata interface. So the key thing about Strata is that we have the same model of our toolbox on the left here. And we've got a set of blocks. So these blocks have already been built. We've got our map interface, which is focused on Somalia here. And you'll see that the interface has a set of these green blocks, which are our environment and climate indicators. And we've got a set of blue blocks here, which are our vulnerability indicators. And we can go into our toolbox and we can say, well, actually, I want to also add some security indicators, and I can choose from our drop-down list. I want to consider just riots, but I can add multiple ones. So there's a lot of flexibility for the users here in terms of dragging in as many security indicators as they want. There's lots of features here to make it as easy as possible for users so that they don't have to go to a user guide. So we've got the an information button that gives more detail on what that particular indicator is doing, a bit of information on the data and where it's from. We've got these little comments here that have a bit more information about the threshold. So this particular comment is talking about the agricultural drought indicator. So it's telling you a little bit more about the details. We can also click on the advanced option button, and this is where, so I said it's about the 25th percentile for the historic NDVI. We can change that to 20 or 15. We can set it higher. And you can set, it maybe in some cases you actually want to change the parameter. So it gives you, there's a lot of flexibility here to explore the data that it's bringing in from Earth Engine and how it's looking at it historically. Now, as you might imagine, that if you've got all these data sets and it's looking at historical, looking through time, it takes a little while to process them. So I'm not going to do these live because even 30, 40 seconds feels like a long time when you're doing a live presentation. So let me quickly show you what the outputs look like. So here we have, what I've done here is just, this is the, here's our blocks on the left. So I've built these blocks. And this is now looking at the dashboard. And you'll see on this dashboard, Banadir is where Mogadishu is. So Mogadishu, because of the very high population density, always looks red. But in Somalia here, what we've got is, it looks pretty boring. The strata score is 0 pretty much everywhere apart from Mogadishu. This is what you might consider a normal year. So this is what I've done here is calculated run the strata score for last year, so 2020 for the first 5 months. Now, if you look at the first 5 months and you do the same process for 2011, you get a very different map. So this map is the first 5 months of 2011. This is before the famine has actually been declared. And what we can see in our interactive map, we can pick out the individual scores for the different regions, or we can go in a little bit more detail and we can get it at the district level. And you can see that the peaks here are in the western region and the borders with Ethiopia and Kenya. And this is what ended up driving a lot of the movement and the refugees in Ethiopia and Kenya. Now, I would be very careful to say that we're not suggesting that this is a tool that predicted predicted the famine, but what it certainly would have done is alerted the in-country teams to the fact that it was that so much of the country was scoring very high in terms of this accumulation of metrics that are driving these hotspots. And part of this, in terms of our interactive dashboard, there's also that you can get data out as CSV files. You can also look at the individual indicators. So we can take a look at just the agricultural drought, for example. And then what you see is the agricultural drought is spread much more evenly across the country, whereas the meteorological drought is more focused into the west of the country. So this is an example, and as I mentioned before, we're very interested in being able to use this tool now in the research in the context of looking at this relationship between climate risks and security, and how that relates to the vulnerability. Now, what I'm going to do next, I'm going to talk just a little bit about the activities that we do with Earth Blox in an education context and some of the specific things for Earth Blox education. Once I finish this demo, I will give you a few more slides that just explain some of the case studies. Now, what I should note is that we've got all these, we've got the input blocks, we've got the analysis blocks, and we've got the output blocks. But we've also got some pre-built blocks. So a bit like the Lego analogy that Genevieve described, is that you can build it from scratch with your own blocks, or you can create a workflow library that has lots of workflows that are already built for you. So these are workflows that I've been building for my teaching and for the online courses that we have. So you might see a few weird things in here. Don't worry about that. But what I'm going to do, first of all, I'm going to go to the tropical storm ID, which was back in 2019. And so I can give a little bit of information here for the person using it. And this is something you can use amongst teams as well. So it may be one person that builds a workflow and then wants to share it with everybody else. They can put it in a workflow library that people can access. They can give a description of what it's doing and how to use it. You can load that workflow into the work area. And you'll notice that what it's done is it's uploaded the area of interest. So this is around Beira in Mozambique. It's loaded the workflow. I'm just going to move this. I can move this so we can look at the map picture better. I'm going to press play while I talk you through the block, because it's collecting a lot of data. It's 6 months worth of Sentinel-1 data over a large area. It's analyzing that. It's calculating the average. It's putting it into monthly bins. And we're going to be able to see an animation of the data collected. But while that's happening, I'm just going to show you some of the features here. Is that because I put this into the workflow library, I've been able to add this little annotation. And what that means in a teaching environment, it means the students can load that up and they can see the description and what to do with it. If you're in a work environment, it's a way for you to note and give explanations to your team members of what the workflow does and how to use it. Earth Blox also comes with tooltips, so the individual blocks have, if you just hover your mouse over it, it tells you information about what you should choose and which parameters are relevant. And so here we've now got the animation, and because this is radar data, when it goes black like that, that means you've got surface water. So the Indian Ocean over here is black because it's of the surface water. And round about March, that's where you see the largest inundation. So we've been looking at this, and in a teaching context, I get students to do things like estimate what the extent of the flooding, the population, use the population data to determine how many people have been impacted by it, and we can do questions like that. I'm going to show you another example now because it highlights, you might have noticed there's a dashboard button there. And so if I load this workflow, is that what this workflow is going to do, this is in May to October. So it's looking at all the fires over the summer period in California, or this area of California, just south of San Francisco. But it's not only looking at the daily active fires, it's also looking at where they occur when compared to the Copernicus global land cover. So what it's doing is it's looking at all the different land cover types, and it's asking where the fires have been. We've put in a block at the bottom to add the table, so not just the visualization, but also generating the table. So if we click on the dashboard, we can see it actually outputs all the metrics. So in this case, we can see that almost 90% of all the areas that have been on fire are actually closed evergreen native forest. And there's a number of other metrics that you can get out of that. you can save the data as a CSV file and do something with it at a later date. And this is also in an assessment context in the university. This allows me to set up tests on the virtual learning network, so they have to put in the answer, the numeric answer, and it gets automatically read, so they can get some feedback on how well they're doing without me being involved. The last example I'm going to show is the sea surface temperature. So this is not, again, using this orange block of the time interval. This is such a large data because it's the entire Pacific over almost a year. So I'm going to use the old trick of the one that I loaded up earlier. So this is our area. Those of you who are familiar with the El Nino effect understand that in normal conditions, the west coast of South America has a cold current that comes up. So it comes up from the Humboldt Current in the southern Pacific. It's an upwelling of cold, rich, nutrient-rich water. That means the fishing is very rich along these areas. But as we play the animation of the monthly time series from April through to March the following year, you'll see that round about December, it starts to warm up. So that current disappears and the warmer tropical waters come down the coast. And so it's around about January and February, it reaches its peak. And so we can use this data. It was an example of how, the range of 700 plus data sets that are available on Earth Engine. So Earth Blox can tap into those, and you can explore the climate and environmental features from that. So I'm now going to talk through just a couple of cases, use cases in the learning and training and capacity development context. So as I mentioned before, I do a lot of teaching with Earth Blox now, and also some online training around the world. And the specific education version of Earth Blox was supported over the last 18 months by the European Space Agency and the UK Space Agency. And we built this in collaboration with a number of other universities. So the University of Leeds, University of Glasgow, and the Open University, and EDINA, which is a mapping unit as part of the University of Edinburgh, and STEM Learning, which is a company that does outreach and school activities. And what nicely makes the segue between the research and the teaching element is this blog that a student of mine wrote. So Stephen wrote this blog, and the UK Space Agency actually published it on their blog site. So if you want to read the whole thing, just search for Earth observation data without coding. Can it be done? If you put in Stephen Roberts as well, you'll be easy to find. But what's interesting about Stephen's journey is that he describes very clearly that coming from a not very numeric background and not knowing how to code, is that it was really daunting for him, and he was really put off about the idea of using satellite data for his research because he really didn't know where to start. And he mentions things like how he struggled to make sense of the mountain of open access satellite data in order to find the best data sets for his study. So there was a real hill to climb for Stephen. And what he says is that he found Earth Blox to be a tool that allowed him to really engage with the global satellite data. He didn't have to download any data, didn't have to install any software. He could do it on his own home computer. And importantly, that gave him a way to explore all this data without having to do any coding. And what it meant is that, like the quote that's on the slide here, Earth Blox became my stepping stone to Earth Engine. It has given me the confidence to begin the process of learning how to code. So what Stephen did next was actually, because he knew what kind of data he wanted to look at, he knew what it should look like, he could start actually learning a little bit of Python on Earth Engine and start actually doing his own coding. So it was a real step up for Stephen. And we found that there's been a lot of positive response from our learners in terms of using Earth Blox. So one example was we put together a massive open online course, a MOOC. It was very successful. We've run it a couple of times now. But one of the key features of why it was unique is that we used this LTI system, so the learning tools interoperability, so that the students, and these were complete beginners. So this course was people that had no technical background at all. And what they could do, instead of giving them a video or a picture of some data and saying, here's the example, is that they could just click on the launch button. It would authenticate them and open up Earth Blox. It would open up the area of interest on the map, and it would put the correct workflow in the workspace. And all they had to do was to press the little play button at the top and run it. So they could actually see it in action and actually process the data themselves. But more than that is that once they'd looked at the example we gave them, they could change the area of interest. They could look at their own backyard. They could look at an area they go on holiday. They could look at an area that was part of their research project or an area that they'd seen on the news recently. And they could also change some of the parameters for the instrument that was an instrument data. They could look at the change in the dates that were chosen. So it allowed the learners in that MOOC to really engage with the data and really explore it. And because it was Earth Engine in the back end, they were able to explore anywhere in the world over a very long time period. And we've also used this LTI. So some of you might be familiar with the Blackboard Learn interface. But at Edinburgh University, this is what we use for a virtual learning environment. And we've just before Christmas, we finished the first delivery of an actual credit-bearing course, which was Earth Observation for Sustainable Development Goals. And you'll see just at the bottom here, there's a little logo of Earth Blox. And what the learners can do is they can click on that link. And again, it just takes them straight through, automatically authenticates them as a user. Sometimes it gives them a workflow pre-built. Sometimes we give it to them just plain, and they have to build their own workflow themselves with some instruction. And the good news is that what we found is that all of the students, all of them said, yes, definitely improved their understanding of EO. And that was the key thing for even some learners who were a little more technical than others. Even they found it as a benefit for their learning in the Earth observation context. And that included mature students doing continual professional development, as well as students on a master's course in data science, and some of our students doing Earth observation and GIS. And just as an example of it's not just us at Edinburgh, our collaborators at the University of Leeds who are now using Earth Blox, Anna reported back to us some other features that we hadn't anticipated, which was that she can now have many more students in her class. So she does an introduction to remote sensing, and she used to be limited by how many students she could get into the computing lab. Now she can have as many as she wants because she runs it through Earth Blox. And what she's also found is that it's opened it up across disciplines. So, and we're finding this at Edinburgh as well, is that people from the law school, social scientists, vets even, who have got an interest in the kind of data that you can get out from Earth Engine, is that because they don't have the barrier of the programming skills, they can access this data and look at time series. And it's really exciting to see these new people getting engaged with Earth observation data. And as Anna has reported, you don't need the computer labs so much anymore. The expensive hardware, the storage, the software to install. You don't need the high bandwidth. A lot of the teaching can be delivered online if need be. And it also, because it works on tablets and various types of computers and laptops across different browsers, it's not as restrictive as many of the other software around. So I'm going to finish there, and I'm going to now pass on to Nick, who's going to talk a little bit about how you actually get Earth Blox. Over to you, Nick.
Thanks, Ian. My name is Nick Beecroft, so I'm the head of sales at Earth Blox, but we offer 3 sector licenses. So we offer an education license, an NGO and charity license, and a commercial and enterprise license. So how do you get a license? There are 3 routes for NGOs and charities, for education facilities, for commercial and enterprise. And the UK and Ireland educational agreements are distributed by a framework called CHEST. This is a framework agreement which every single education facility can use to join on to Earth Blox with ease. And this allows education facilities to sign up for licenses at scale for 1 to 3 years to easily help you improve your impact and to very, very quickly get on board with the system. NGOs and charities, you also benefit from our support and into all the good work with heavily discounted license costs, and you just need to reach out to Earth Blox to discuss that. And commercial business and enterprise would be delighted to talk to you about how Earth Blox can support your requirement for Earth observation data in minutes, not months, regardless of your user's skill. So look, we'd love for you to join us in the journey, and that's a journey that's based on two beliefs: that everyone everywhere should be able to benefit from the power of planetary scale satellite data, and that solving problems with Earth observation should be simple, powerful, and effortless. So to get in touch, scan the QR code or email me directly, and we'll start the conversation today. So a quick thank you to Google Earth Outreach for inviting us, to Ian and Genevieve for their fantastic session, and to you, the viewers, for your time and your participation. If you have any questions, then we'd love to take them now.
Wonderful. Hello, everybody. Welcome back, team. And thank you all for your questions that were coming in during the presentation. And thank you so much to the Earth Blox team for their presentation as well. And so as a reminder, we're in the live Q&A section now. And for everybody out there watching, you can still submit your questions right below the video. Just scroll down and you can see all these other questions that your colleagues and other partners have been asking during the presentation. Okay, so let's take our first question. Okay, I see the first question that came in that I think was for Ian. This is from John D. Is building construction type considered in the vulnerability scoring? I think this happened when you were presenting about one of the applications. Ian, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. Hi, John. It's not a very usual name you've got, so I'm assuming it's the same John that did our masters some years ago. So great that you're here, and nice to hear from you. It's a good question. One of the reasons that UNIT were excited about Earth Blox is the flexibility of being able to incorporate data that's relevant. So if any other kind of vulnerability indicator, so the way that we've been building it so far was specifically with teams in Somalia and Colombia and Haiti. The construction type wasn't one that they brought up, but you can bring in any vulnerability indicator. And the key thing is that if you've got access to data, if you've got data that's only specific to your country or location, then that's the beauty of the Earth Blox interface, is that there is a way to use Earth Blox to build that, to bring in that extra data, to add it as an indicator. If that customizability is one of the key benefits that we see of the approach, the Earth Blox approach to the Strata platform. If it's something that you're interested in or need, I suggest get in touch with us, John. We can have a longer conversation about that and see how best to do something along those lines.
Awesome, thanks, Ian. Okay, so the next question is also from John, and it's a kind of a specific question around the user interface. If your stacked blocks in Earth Blox have different spatial resolutions, is the user alerted? Are you alerted as the user? Ian, do you want to take this one too?
Yeah, I can take that too. So that's another good question, John. And there is information that comes through to the user to flag up issues such as the dates, because some of the indicators are driven by, for example, Sentinel-2 data. So it could only be it might be a week up to date. It might have satellite data that's just arrived in the last 24, 48 hours. Other data for the indicators may be fairly difficult to get hold of and are more static, especially when it comes to the socio-economic indicators. So there is information in there and the user guide to make sure that the users are clear about the data sources. So not just in time, but also the spatial resolutions of them. And so it's that level. The important thing is that there's a very clear transparency, so that the users can see exactly where the data is coming from, and there's clarity on on what's been done. It's not a black box.
Okay, that's great. Okay, so Ian, I'm going to keep you on the spot here, and then we'll move to some other questions.
Spotlight's on me.
Yeah, next one's from Augustine L. And they ask why this difference between agricultural drought and meteo drought in Somalia 2011.
So that's a good question. The key thing, meteorological drought is driven by the rainfall. So if an area has less rainfall than you would expect, it will get flagged up as meteorological drought. The agricultural drought, on the other hand, is driven by what's happening on the ground, and in particular, in Strata, it's mostly driven by NDVI measurements, so the healthiness of the vegetation on the surface. And what that means is that you can be in areas downstream that maybe haven't had a lot of rainfall, but is still getting enough water through irrigation or just through the water that's coming down through the river system. So you might have an area that has had less rain than normal, but there may be enough water in the soils to keep the vegetation and therefore the agricultural drought above that or below the threshold, so that it doesn't get red flagged between the meteorological and agricultural drought.
Awesome, thank you, Ian. Okay, so the next question was from Augustine again. So Augustine says, could you zoom in sometime on the left-hand panel? It's hard to see. And so maybe you all could walk them through just what is in the left-hand panel. And maybe, Genevieve, do you want to take this one?
Yes, sure, of course. Hi, Augustine. Thanks for your question. So the way that the left-hand panel works really is structured threefold. So you first have the input data. So the first kind of area where you have a drop-down menu with all the different blocks is where you select the data that you're interested in and the type of data. So you may be interested in forest-related data or in agriculture data. So any form of data is available there. Then in the Analyze panel, that's where you decide what you want to do with this data. Do you want to compare? Do you want to actually do classifications? Do you want to do a time series or all sorts of other potential mathematical equations as well that you can put in there? So that's the analysis part of the toolbox. Then after this, you have the output. So how is it that you want to see the data? Do you want to see it in visual terms? So in maps, or do you actually want dashboards, tables? Do you want to download this? And ultimately, you have to download whether you want this to see this on the screen or you want to work elsewhere. So that's kind of the structure and the layout of the toolbox.
Wonderful. Thank you, Genevieve. Okay, so the next question is from Alejandro H. Could you run a live demo on the Tonga eruption using Earth Blox? So maybe I know we don't have that demo prepared on that, or maybe you guys do. I don't know, but maybe you could just walk how you would do that. What are the steps that you would take? Ian, do you want to take that one?
Sure. That brings up a couple of points which I think are it's very relevant just now. One is that right at this moment we're short of one Sentinel-1 satellite because Sentinel-1B is currently having problems, and so the coverage is very slow. The other challenge you have is cloud cover, and so the way that you go about that, you would essentially you would drag in the data blocks. You would choose the area on the map. You can take a look at the time series and see what's happening. But the other thing I wanted to pick up is just one of the things that, and in fact, Karen, and this is maybe something that you can take to your team as well, trying to encourage the disaster charter triggers and the satellite data that gets collected. I'm trying to encourage a few providers to actually just put it on Earth Engine. So put that imagery on Earth Engine so everybody can access it and do new stuff, or retrospectively actually look at things that we might not have noticed at the time that we might be able to use to feed into doing that in the future. But that's how you go about doing it, and that actually reminds me is I should really go and have a quick look at that.
Yeah, that's great, Ian. We have a whole crisis response team on our Google Maps and our Google Search division. They work really closely together to get that data out there. So yeah, I'll follow up with them and see, what are the different options here, and we can include that in the text answer of Alejandro's question later. Thank you for that, Ian. Okay, so the next question is from Rabia. For your demos, was all the data extracted from Google Earth Engine catalog, or were there some other data sets used as well? I remember you guys actually talked about that you brought in one data set of your own. Maybe you could talk more about that. Now, Genevieve, do you want to take that?
Yes, sure. I'm happy to start, and I'm sure Ian will have more to contribute. So yes, the data doesn't all come from Google Earth Engine, so we can bring in other data sets as well. So some of the data sets that were included in Strata includes ACLID, for instance. So the answer is yes, you can include other data sets if needed in your analyses. Ian, you may want to give even more detail as to the diversity of data sets
Well, that was
we can bring in.
Your answer was perfect. As ACLID's the only one that we aggregate ourselves and bring into Earth Engine so that we can access it through Strata. The other thing that we're in the next phase of developing this is making it much easier for teams who have their own data that they maybe have got more trust because they collected the data themselves, or it's a national data set that's not normally available. And allowing that data to be accessed as well is a key ambition that we've got for Strata. But just about everything apart from the ACLID data comes from Earth Engine at the moment.
I may extend that answer actually, because I see that there's a question about the planet data that someone's asked as well. So we just signed an agreement with Planet. So yes, planet data is now accessible through Earth Blox.
You taking my big marketing announcement away from me?
Well, yeah, and I wanted to also plug that there is a suggest a data set part of Earth Engine where you can go into the help menu and click suggest a data set, and the team is constantly looking at that, and the more votes that certain data sets get, the more that they will be added if there are open and governmental data sets, and then if they're available on Earth Engine, then of course Earth Blox will be able to easily get them as well, because they can be able to extract all of that Earth Engine data catalog data as well. So that's wonderful. Okay, so the next question here is, let's see, I wrote down from Fernando B. Awesome presentation, very inspiring. My question is Earth Blox restricted in terms of computing time or max pixels as it happens in some analyses in Earth Engine? Do you guys know? We can also answer over text later.
Yeah, it's probably a question for our CTO, actually. I think there is a certain amount of computing time, so we throttle users and so on. But in terms of the details of how much, I would need to sort of respond offline. Wonderful. So do get in touch and we'll answer that.
Okay, great. I will do that. If you guys get in touch, you can do that. We can also, if we get the answer soon, we can add it to the text-based Q&A as well. Okay, so I know that there were a couple of questions about educational pricing, so I want to leave some time at the end for Nick to go over some of those again. And there's 4 or 5 questions about that. So I'll kind of group those. There's other questions about drone imagery. So that I'd love to have you guys talk about that. From Ricardo A. Are there examples of using drone imagery, and how would that be done?
At the moment, no. So we've not integrated drone imagery into Earth Blox yet, but that's just because there hasn't been a demand for this. So if you do have a demand and a need, there, in the same way that we can integrate planet data or other kinds of data, yeah, it's a conversation we need to have. Perfect.
And so a lot of these other some of these questions are coming in and they're getting technical, which is, I think, a good thing. So I love it. People are trying to figure out exactly how they're going to use it. With Earth Blox, is it possible to develop a projection on how the data will change in the coming years? So do forecasting and projection analysis.
So we are embarking in this work as we speak, especially the work with the UN. So the answer is yes, but this is not a functionality that's available right now.
Okay. Okay, good to know. Good to know. This is great, you guys. I think we're getting through all of the questions. I'm going to answer a couple of other questions in the text-based. I see a question here, and then we'll go over to Nick to kind of close us out, and we can group some of the other questions for him. But this question here is a good segue into it. It's from Alejandro, and he writes, I teach a remote sensing course, and we do use Earth Engine. This would be a nice opportunity to test Earth Blox. How can I include it on my current course? Is there a tutorial, a fee to pay? And he left his email there, but one, just to kind of group them together here, Mohan Z asks who can access it and utilize Earth Blox. Amika talks about how they might register for it. And so Nick, there's a bunch of questions about how to get started. Can you go over the licensing again, and then do another call to action on how to get in touch with you guys and register for this?
Yeah, absolutely. So the quick answer is everyone and anyone has the ability to use it, regardless of who you are, the technical skill or whatever. But as to say, if you're an NGO, if you're a charity, if you are from an education institution, all you have to do is come and talk to us. We really, really heavily support that. It all fits with our mission and everything that we're working towards, everything that we believe, and the whole reason that we embarked upon building this tool. And that's why we support so heavily the work that's happening there in the next generations of people that are coming through the industry. So come and talk to us. Very, very simply, we'll sell institutional licenses to your education facility. And equally, if you're an NGO or a charity, come and talk to us, because we'll support you in those efforts too. If you're looking for commercial licenses, then again, it's really, really simple. You come and talk to us. We'll talk about your need. We'll figure out where we fit in your, through the process of work that you're doing, and we're more than happy to supply you with proposals and pricing and support you through the work that you're doing as well. So just reach out is the easy answer.
Maybe I can help here a little bit. So there's the question whether you can actually use Earth Blox into your courses and you can test Earth Blox. So at the moment, we don't have a sort of an open trial version. So what we recommend, however, is if you want to trial Earth Blox, or have a demo of Earth Blox, you reach out to us and we can go through the different steps, share with you the different teaching material that are available through Earth Blox. There's lots of content that you can base your decision on, but we need to start having that conversation first.
That's great. And I just want to give another call out to, if on the event page, you'll see a green star and it says register here. You could, that's a good start to click on that. And you'll be able to get in touch with the team here. Well, I hate to close it down here. There's a couple other questions around getting more access. So hopefully that register button will answer some of those questions. But I wanted to take this moment to thank our team. Thank you guys very much for presenting today and asking all the burning questions of all of our viewers. And thank you all to the viewers out there for watching and for your engaging questions to all of our speakers today. We hope that you are inspired to keep learning and to tune into some of our future events. In fact, next week, we're having 2 lightning round series all about forest and nature topics. This is a follow-on from our Geo for Good Summit last year in November. There was too many speakers, so we decided to break them out and continue the excitement into the new year. So don't miss that. That's happening next week. You'll find it on the website. Okay, well, thanks again, Earth Blox team. Excited that we had this opportunity together, and you guys happy mapping out there. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.